I'll go ahead and get us started and say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. I know certainly for our panelists, we're across all spectrums today. And welcome so much to the Curationist Annual Metadata Learning and Unlearning Summit. This is our third year hosting this event. It certainly has become the highlight of my year with Curationist. And so I'm so excited to jump in and get started talking about our theme this year, which is metadata outside the box, exploring really interesting or novel ways of using metadata as part of the historic record. Nicole, can we go to the next slide, please? That's me. Before we get started, I really wanted to talk to you a little bit about Curationist and how we use metadata on our platform, sometimes out of the box. For those who don't know, Curationist is at heart a search aggregator. We accession in, it says on our website 4.4 million object records. I've been told recently that number is a little higher, so stay tuned. And make them all searchable in one place. That means that on the back end, we're doing a lot of normalization and cross-referencing across metadata fields. The heart of what we do is all about making these objects more accessible, more findable, and more public facing on the web. We can go to the next slide, please. There are three sort of pillars to our platform, and I wanted to make sure we highlight them today so you can see how metadata really is sort of the engine that makes our platform run. The first of those is, of course, the individual work. These are the individual object records that come to us from our source institutions. Of course, each of those object records may contain multiple images per record, and they also contain the original metadata attached to those objects. They also occasionally contain original metadata records that were contributed by curationist researchers. Those are our archivists, who you'll meet today on the call, as well as additional metadata from our researchers, our writers, our fellows, our critics, et cetera, et cetera. From there, we collect those records into collections. Collections are things that we make ourselves on the website, but also anyone can log into the platform and start to create their own collections that span across different institutions. Those collections can be organized however you want, but they are usually multiple works connected via common thread or theme. Like I mentioned, you are able to collect works across different institutions, and they can be created both by our curationist team as well by individual users who come to the platform. From those curated collections, we expand outward just one more ring to our editorial features. These are essays and art criticism that appear on our site from our amazing authors. They each contain embedded links to the individual works that are being discussed, and they often come from a accompanying collection. So you can see all of those things in one place. Those editorial features really help us push the metadata and the historic record a little bit further. We love to be able to spotlight reimagined narratives of cultural heritage and layers of knowledge about these objects that haven't been platformed before. And of course, if you're interested in submitting a collection or an editorial feature to be spotlit on our site, please definitely go to the website, curationist.org, and find our submission guidelines, because we're always looking to feature new writers. So I say all that to say that, as you can see, metadata is really at the heart of everything that we do. There's certainly some out-of-the-box work that we do, and I know our archivists have a really wonderful example of that to share with you next. But the truth is that the best part of doing the summit is because metadata is so central to what we do internally that it's nice to have this moment once a year to sort of expand our conversation and bring in new voices and hear about other ways that people are using metadata in the field around the world. So again, welcome, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, etc. And thank you so much for being here. It's really a joy. With that, I think I'll hand it off to you, Sharon, to talk about our amazing panelists today and to sort of orient us all to the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda. So I'm so excited to have these three people here with us today. They really all have interesting and I think from an American Western archives and museum perspective, very different and evolving ways of thinking about and using metadata. Kyle Perry is a writer and professor based in San Francisco and Santa Cruz. He is the author of A Theory of Assembly, From Museums to Memes, and the co-editor of Ubiquity, Photography's Multitudes. He is finishing a book called Ways of Seeing After Dark. He teaches at UC Santa Cruz in a department called History of Art and Visual Culture, or HAVC, HAVC. Lydia Mardirian is a researcher living in Beirut. With a background in art history, she is interested in the affective and sensorial qualities of vernacular photographs, as well as their sociality and historicity. She works as a researcher at the Arab Image Foundation. And Haley Lohman is an artist based in Los Angeles. Lohman is the co-founder and director of Los Angeles Contemporary Archive, LACA, an artist book library and arts archive dedicated to contemporary art making. Lohman launched the Oral History Group, an oral history cooperative that enriches and complicates LACA's collections. She co-developed Archive Night School, an after-work education program that emphasizes learning from each other's experiences to create new works that privilege the desires and needs of our communities. So I'm super excited to have a conversation with you all today. I'll also be inviting in our digital archivists, Jessica Gengler and Emily Benoff, so that we can have kind of a group conversation after you've all had a chance to give your presentations. But before that, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got to this theme. And if we could have the next slide, Nicole, please. Yeah, so I'm the metadata manager here at Curationist, and I want to just talk a little bit about the background of how we got to this idea of metadata outside the box. It started with one of our feature writers, Nick Caldwell, who was working on the article Black Power in Print, Iconography of the Black Panther Party, which you can find on our site. And this image was one he wrote about. And whenever writers use images from Curationist's database, the records come to our digital archivists, Jessica Gengler and Emily Benoff, to enhance the metadata. And so when deciding what additional subject terms to add to this record, Emily originally proposed police and police officer because the text of the image mentions policeman. And as metadata manager, I was a little resistant at first to this addition because the image does not actually depict police officers, but rather Black Panthers organizing in resistance to the police. So we discussed among ourselves and we asked ourselves the classic cataloging question, would people searching for images of police expect to find this image? And then we asked ourselves if maybe they should find this image. Maybe they should find not only imagery specifically depicting police, but acts of resistance to them, and that this might provide a fuller picture of what policing means and does in the world. So we eventually decided not to assign the general terms police and police officer, but to add police brutality, which would ensure the record comes up in searches for police, but also provides additional context for why the image exists in the first place, right? So it's not just what the image is about, there's more information there in terms of, why does this image even exist? And so through this process, we started thinking about what subversive or unexpected metadata might look like and how it might impact findability and express a point of view. Because even though it has pretended otherwise, metadata has never been neutral, right? So how can we use it to represent and guide us to a more inclusive, truthful, and passionate engagement with culture and history? And this is something that is especially needed right now here in the US as we witness widespread attempts to erase and distort our histories. As people gathered here today, invested in cultural heritage preservation, it is our duty to resist this erasure and to resist the distortion of our stories and our histories. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to our first presenter, Kyle Perry.
Many thanks to Curationist for the invitation to speak and to everyone who organized this really rich event. Many thanks also to everyone in attendance today. It's really exciting. I'm honored to be a part of this panel, and I plan to speak for about 9 or 10 minutes. Next slide, please. So I decided to start with a soothing sunset over the Mojave Desert. I did this partly because I'm speaking to you from California, from foggy San Francisco. But the main reason is that sunsets get me to something beautiful that John Berger once said. Next slide. Berger wrote, "The relation between what we see and what we know is never settled." And Berger's example was the sunset. He said, "Each evening we see the sun set. We know that the earth is turning away from it, yet the knowledge, the explanation, never quite fits the sight." So it sounds a bit strange, but I think we can actually rework Berger's observation for metadata. Each day, we find that the ideas we've inherited about metadata don't quite fit the radical changes we see all around us. Our received knowledge of metadata never quite matches the site. Next slide. A few years ago, I became metadata obsessed. I'd participated in a few metadata projects back in graduate school, and now I was interested, or at this point, I was interested in how and why we might critically and even creatively revise what we think we know about metadata. I found that not a small number of critics agreed. They felt that we need to unsettle the widely held idea that metadata is, at the end of the day, data about data. I agreed with that, but I also thought that we should maybe take that thought further. Not just unsettle the assumption, but contest it, rework it, overcome it. Metadata is not data about data. Next slide. Now, the case for embracing the notion of data about data is pretty clear. Metadata does some pretty significant, pretty great stuff. Curationist is a prime example, as is this photograph of Ida B. Wells Barnett, which is cited by Curationist in their website's sophisticated overview of how they work with metadata. I mean, think about how much wouldn't be possible without data about data, how much we'd miss, how much we couldn't see or do. The trouble is that data and aboutness are, in my view anyway, really only part of the story of metadata. In fact, I think we've been lured into an illusory and even exclusionary way of looking at metadata, with this sticky phrase, data about data, as a key symptom of this illusory way of looking. Next slide. For one thing, a lot has changed since the term was invented in the 1960s. Metadata now comes in many forms, not always descriptive. People need metadata for much more than data organization. And not infrequently, the metadata is as important as the content. It even serves as a replacement. Next slide. Social and machine learning-based media throw jet fuel on these changes. Metadata is as much an event as a thing. Metadata brings joy. Just ask anyone who's gotten a like from Taylor Swift. Metadata also brings anxiety. Ask anyone who's been left on red. Metadata is an expressive medium. Content creators are metadata creators. Meanwhile, addictive media platforms serve as metadata machines. Metadata is money. So in my view, data about data doesn't get close to capturing these new realities, not the phrase itself, but also not the thinking that phrase upholds. There's this towering premise that metadata is fundamentally secondary and descriptive. Next slide. Another issue with the notion of data about data is more daunting. It's become increasingly clear that metadata cannot be separated from economic and political domination. This is evident in the use of metadata in practices of extraction, ethnic cleansing, and propaganda. As many here will know, a former director of the NSA famously said, "We kill people based on metadata." The role of metadata in domination is also evident from other angles. I think of projects in reparative and decolonial metadata. There's a recognition that vast quantities of our metadata inheritance, terms, taxonomies, inventories, owe their origins and their outlines to histories of racism, capitalism, and imperialism. The assumption that metadata basically equals data about data helps hide these historical and political entanglements. Even if this hiding isn't, explicitly intentional, I also don't think we can call it an accident. Next slide. In my essay, I asked what we ought to do once we observe all this. One idea is to test other prepositions and therefore other relations. I took inspiration from a seemingly impossibly unrelated source. Early in one of her films, the great filmmaker Trin Minh Ha says she won't try to speak about the people in her film, which happen to be women in rural Senegal. She would try to speak nearby them. This is a way, she says, of getting close to a subject without seizing or claiming it. I wondered what happens when we shift to thinking of metadata as data near data. And if we then multiply that to say data, information, statements near objects, near media, and even near people. Next slide. Part of this has become routine. We read posts not just for their content, but also for the metadata that surrounds them. We, and I include machines in this we read assemblies of media and metadata. We examine proximities and relations. And that includes inferred relational information. The box we could put this post in, the subgenre this choice of music is trying to do. We literally engage metadata as data near data, not just about it. Next slide. Less familiar are examples like WhatsApp. On the one hand, yes, metadata is acting like data about data here. Metadata organizes WhatsApp messages, which are apparently encrypted. On the other hand, as I said before, metadata is money and metadata is power. As Meredith Whitaker, the head of Signal, observed, Meta's encryption of user content coincides with the extraction of extraordinary amounts of metadata. When those metadata fuse with other information sources, profits and opportunities follow. Here, there's an attempt to get near to subjects, to mold and approximate their wishes, to change what they hold near, to keep them near to their devices, or, in the most dire instances, to make certain people go away. I think of these as hidden and manipulative proximities. But it's not all bad, of course. Next slide. Data near data also points us to things that deserve respect. Things like radical and progressive hashtags or decolonial metadata-driven projects. With traditional knowledge or TK labels, for example, Indigenous communities show the way toward careful and contingent proximity. Place metadata near objects that indicate when those objects ought or ought not be seen and why, to whom they ought to be close, from whom and from what they ought to be held distant. Next slide. Am I saying that metadata isn't ever about aboutness? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we need to unsettle the relations between what we see in metadata and what we know of metadata, what we value from metadata and what we do with metadata. We need to rethink and redo distributive metadata, expressive metadata, anti-capitalist metadata. In the digital era, assemblies of media and metadata stage contested relations at all scales. These contested relations are variously about, near, for, between, and too often against living people. Last slide. At the heart of all these provocations are visions that long precede me, visions of a different world. Metadata seems poised to persist as an engine for the things we need to tear down. Let's call that out. And let's also continue to redirect metadata and, of course, the necessary money and time toward the things that we ought to uplift. Not metadata about us, metadata for us, not metadata for data's sake or for capital's sake, metadata for our sake. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you to the curationists and everyone that is viewing now. I saw a name from Beirut, so Masal Khair. My talk is maybe, I never thought to interrogate metadata as a concept, and I think this is really interesting. So thank you, Kyle. But my talk is about, well, metadata and how at the Arab Image Foundation we use it within our practice of care for photographic objects. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'll give a very brief kind of introduction to the foundation. This is our space in Beirut. It's where I'm sitting right now. So the foundation was founded in 1997 by two photographers and an artist. It was founded in Beirut. And and it was and remains an archive that collects, preserves, digitizes, and researches photographs from Southwest Asia and North Africa. We are not an image bank, so there are very specific photographic collections that are a reflection of a particular person's research interest or our kind of interest as a foundation. Initially, the founders were wanting to establish a record of photographic practices from this part of the world. So the kind of name of the foundation is a bit misleading. It's not to say that there is an Arab image, but rather it's an image foundation that's located in this part of the world. We've been interrogating this use of the word Arab a lot within the 28-year history, because in fact most of the photographers, or a lot of them, are Armenian after the genocide. Anyway, what did I want to say? So yeah, the idea was more, okay, what are the expressions of photography? How have they been, how's photography been used as a medium by local practitioners from this part of the world? Yeah, so currently, what we do in the space is it's a more of a public-facing space. We've been in this space for the last 2 years. It's a library as well as a research area. So on the left there is the auditorium, where we have screenings. The library consists of publications from the Arab Image Foundation, Dawawin, which was forced to close after the financial crisis, and public works and archive books. And in there, to the right, you can see the preservation and digitization lab, so you can kind of get a view into them. So initially, collections were researched, and there were these research missions within the area, and also by 2003 within the diaspora. Now people tend to approach us, and this is because we have many photographs that still need processing and still need adequate care. Of course, there is limited labor, resources, and funding, so we're quite we won't take something on unless we think that we can provide adequate care. Anyway, we can go to the next slide now, please. Okay, so this is an example of an image or a photographic object, I should say, that is within our collection. So as I said, we're located in Beirut, in Lebanon. We're an archive in place, let's say. So we're wanting to keep them within the area as much as possible. And while this, kind of contrary to the colonial wisdom that, they're better off and they're safer in the West. That being said, while photographic objects, prints, negatives on acetate, nitrate, or glass do perish, as everything naturally does, everything has a limited temporal scope. Here, there is the possibility of destruction beyond natural deterioration. While this became violently apparent last year when Israel escalated their war on Lebanon and expanded it to Beirut, our photographic collections constantly remind us of this reality as well, because they testify to histories of violence and erasure, whether that be through a collection that traces the experience of Armenian refugees displaced to a camp in Syria after the Armenian genocide, through a collection that documents destruction and displacement in Jerusalem during the 1948 Nakba of Palestine, or through collections of simple everyday life, collections that feature candid snapshots, studio portraits, Indeed, while the Arab Image Foundation holds images of historical gravity, there are also thousands of intimate images that are estranged from the life world from which they emerged. They no longer reside in the company of those who could describe the narrative image, who could understand on an affective level why there was a desire to capture that particular moment in time, such as this image here. It's a family portrait. Indeed, in many instances, we're assuming the voice of an image subject when we're speaking about the photographs, and when we provide the metadata for photographs. So the combination of living in this context and spending time with these photographic collections gives rise to a particular attunement. On the one hand, there's a feeling of anticipation kind of looming, and on the other hand, there is an awareness of the preciousness of these photographic objects, and the histories the material plane gives rise to or realizes. It's for this reason that our relationship to the photographs, the photographic objects, is that of custodianship. Put differently, we feel that we have been entrusted to care for these photographic objects. There's a sanctity almost. And this responsibility instills a need to record and safeguard. So while our practice of care takes place across each kind of strata of the photographic object, hence our preference of a term that speaks to the photograph's dimensionality and materiality. As we see in this example here, the whole image is digitized. Nothing is corrected, nothing is made clearer, and all of the creases, all of the markings, they're maintained because they do speak to the life worlds from which they emerged and what happened to this object through the vicissitudes of time. Yes, as I said, while this care does take place across the different strata, preservation, digitization, today I'm discussing how we practice care within the research lab of the Arab Image Foundation, and specifically within documentation. That is how we harvest metadata from photographic objects and the language we then apply to them, or the metadata that then kind of emerges. Next slide, please. So there are guiding ethical imperatives on how we do this work, which I'll further explicate with case studies. But in order to care for these photographic objects, through metadata, we aim to mobilize language that communicates a recognition of past oppression, an acknowledgement of coloniality. The camera was and continues to be an essential weapon in the colonial arsenal, and a prioritization of the image subject, ensuring that they're highlighted and their narrative is highlighted, that they aren't, where relevant, carrying the burden of horrors that succeeded them, that where possible, imagines a world that was and could be, a world before the acceleration of colonial capitalism and a world beyond empire, and that allows histories, the plural, to proliferate, and resist history with a capital H, the history of colonial archives. And this we do with the amount of information and detail we harvest. And I don't like this word because I find it a bit extractivist, but it's the way it is. And the language that we use. So words here are obviously central. Next slide, please. Okay, so in 2023, the Arab Image Foundation decided to start building a controlled vocabulary that is a thesaurus curated by an institution that is particular to their specialization, linguistic preferences, and ethical positioning. A controlled vocabulary standardizes terms in order to ensure consistency and accuracy in internal and external communication, to facilitate the retrievability of data, and to reflect cultural and political sensitivities, and to establish an institutional voice. And we did this or we started this, or we decided on the structure and rationale of the vocabulary in 2023 with Sharon in Beirut, which was really fun. So I'm sorry for the quality of this. This is a pixelated, horrible screen grab, but Yeah. Here we have our forms of oppression category, which I'll return to. So the vocabulary consists of 19 categories, but today we're just interested in forms of oppression and locations. So, yes. I know I'm talking a lot, but I'm going to get to a point. So forms of oppression is extremely relevant to our archive because of what we have been entrusted to care for, and locations named, especially because we refuse to participate in colonial, especially as applied geographically, locations, because they erase people from their land in the past and the present. Okay, so language is part of our practice of care. Okay, next slide, please. So the case study that we want to look at is the Linda Jacobs collection. So Linda Jacobs is a scholar and author, and she donated these stereographs mainly from Palestine, but also Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria at the end of the 19th century. So she donated them in 2021. Okay, next slide, please. So stereographs are they were invented in 1830s, 1840s, and they were, so there's two images that are slightly different and they're situated side by side. And with a stereoscope, when the viewer looks through it with a stereoscope, it creates a three-dimensional image. So the image appears in a dimension form. They're layered images so that it does enhance this dimensionality. And basically they were for, if we want, armchair travel. So it allowed people, let's say, honestly, in Europe, in Western Europe and America, to view places that they wouldn't see otherwise. These are from 1900, for example. So I'm gonna skip some things because I know time's not on my side. But with this example here, the caption that we decided on was view of Jaffa taken from the Mediterranean Sea. And in brackets, there's Joppa, making reference to how the original Keystone View Company described or referenced the place. Next slide, please. So each of these stereographs have on the back a narrative or an annotation, which I won't read out, but you can read it on the screen. But basically, the whole collection, the annotations speak to, on the one hand, a colonial view and a biblical narrative. So there is this colonial and theological imposition on the land and in and on the people. What we do with this is we try to, I suppose, return it to Palestine in a kind of secular form. So that means the information or the metadata that is harvested is the year, we name it as Palestine, the region is the Lida district, and the city is Jaffa. It's only in the case of Palestine that we refer to places as they were before the colonial infliction. Otherwise, we refer to places in their modern day naming. The tags for this image, can we go back, please? Back one slide, please. Oh, sorry. Okay, pretty obvious ones: boat, oar, rope, sea, wave, city, building, man, child. Okay, and then there's also architecture, rowing, transportation, habitation, biblical narrative, colonial photography, Orientalism, religious tourism, armchair travel, and colonial gaze. And I'll explain why in a moment. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is another example from the collection. This is also Jaffa in 1900. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. This is a stereograph of a village that that was depopulated and destroyed, ethnically cleansed and destroyed by the Zionists in 1948. So while we have in the documentation things like mountain, village, stone, arch, horse, man, woman, child, tree, we also have, again, colonial photography, colonial gaze, Orientalism, religious tourism, armchair travel, and biblical narrative. So we describe the image, but we also describe what is taking place, I guess, ideologically, or how these images were kind of used and how the photographer was viewing the landscape. And this is important because things are not neutral and our metadata can't be either. There is a material reality of settler colonialism and occupation. I mean, there's a genocide taking place. For us to be neutral in how we speak about particular images, colonial images that, you know, assisted in the colonization of the land, would be a detriment and would be an injustice to the subjects that were forced to be imaged and the land in itself. Next slide, please. This is, again, similar kind of thing. There's a biblical narrative, there's a colonial narrative, there's a lot of condescension, but for the sake of time, we can pass through. So next slide, please. So, back on, please. Next one, yeah. So with this collection, for example, we pass through layers of information of metadata to harvest metadata. So there is the image in itself, and then there's these different registers. There's a biblical register, there's a colonial register, and then there's an acknowledgement that we have to have of that present day, our present day. So we harvest, we take as much information as we can, harvest the metadata, and then convert that into documentation metadata that through language simultaneously registers the Euro-American colonial and theological framing, rejects the Zionist colonial infliction that would follow, and honors the subjects and the land in the image and in the present day. Okay, next slide. And this is my conclusion. I know I talk too much. The conclusion is, and this is maybe our metadata more outside the box. So we can go to the next slide. So here is a reconstructed glass plate negative. So we recently received a collection of glass plate negatives from a studio that was located in Kirkuk. And the studio was run by a Kurdish photographer. Kirkuk was subject to waves and waves of Arabization, wherein the Kurdish, Armenian, and Assyrian communities were attempted to be erased from the land. So miraculously, this photo studio survived, and so did these glass plates, albeit a lot of them are broken, and this is a reconstructed and digitized record. So in this case, with the metadata here, we've just started working on this collection, but because it's all studio photography, what we want to do, in keeping with this idea of archiving in place to honor the subjects and the histories and the land, is to actually crowdsource the research and the harvesting of metadata. So we're going to put it out to people in Kirkuk and see if they can locate people, provide particular narratives and things like this. So from this, there is this, again, emphasis of people and places situated in place, and a kind of refusal of colonial realities through giving rise to particular information and detail, and putting a name on particular things. Yeah. Sorry, I went over. I think I lost track of time. I really like talking about photos, so I rambled. But I'll leave it at that, and there is the Q&A. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, with that, Haley, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks so much. I am going to share and so let's see, I'm gonna hit play. Okay, can we all see this big logo situation? Excellent. Okay, thanks for having me. And thanks so much, Lydia and Kyle, for everything you've shared today. So my name is Haley Lohman, and I'm an artist, and I co-started Los Angeles Contemporary Archive, LACA, and co-run. LACA is a public artist archive and artist book library focused on contemporary art making. So LACA is organized by item level. Our keywords and our descriptions have been entered primarily by our object owners. So this has resulted in 13 years of incredible information from each other. It's also extremely messy and has its limitations. So I was actually hoping to better talk with each other about this. Let's look at this image, and in the chat, if we could attach some keywords to it. And maybe I'll ask Jessica or Emily if you could read them off, if that's possible. And this isn't a trap, it's really anything that might be helpful for someone to find this. Oh, I can
Sure, we
multitask.
have mail, correspondence, envelope, handwritten, postage, vehicle lease, US postage, bill, to-do list, notes, flyer, handwriting, vehicle lease, rail up, 2018, several for correspondence, time sensitive. Dance party,
Okay.
2017, Idaho.
Thank you. So this is a DJ set lineup from this party called Rail Up. So with these, words that we've just heard, how might these keywords help us to understand how artists congregate, party, be joyous together? How can our data that we attach to our objects give context about the party promoter, or Sam in this case, their precarity, leasing a car, the freneticness of writing a lineup on the back of a bill. And then, let's see, are there any more, Jessica?
Yeah, I had English language, memory, American envelope, London, August 2017, digital address, scrap paper, March 24, 2018.
Great.
I think that's
So that's pretty much it. So how can our descriptions then, let's say, explain the whisper networks that we built to warn each other about one of the DJs, or where the restroom is, or where the bar is. And then if I have 50 envelopes or 600 envelopes, how do I find this one? Kind of like some of our descriptive words: white, clear window, lease, time sensitive. Okay, thanks for doing that with me. This image is from our database, where you or an artist could upload your materials to LACA, and then you would do exactly that. You would describe things. Okay. So today I'm going to quickly share a bit about LACA, and then I want to discuss two collections where metadata subverts source material and proposes new relationships. So Fixing Papers, a collection organized by artists who are navigating immigration systems, and the John Birtle collection, which is a collection organized by one artist who brings together ephemera from seemingly disconnected projects and art spaces in LA. Okay, so to start, when LACA started over 13 years ago, a bunch of us pooled our ephemera and our artist books together into one location so that we could come and learn from each other's creative work. For me, I wanted to look at our ephemera, a prop, a napkin, a pay stub, or a receipt, not as a new artwork, but as residue from an artwork that could help us read the circumstances the artwork was made in. Today, we're still gathering each other's material with a finer tuned idea that by better understanding our conditions, we can challenge values that prioritize wealth creation and sustain historical inequities so that we can all live better right now. We work with artists to build and describe their collections, which include performance ephemera, studio leases, contracts, pay stubs, performance apparel, set pieces, text messages, class syllabi, oral histories such as memo anecdotes, jokes, ghost stories, or materials from formerly running art spaces. Okay. So this is Fixing Papers, and it's a collection that explores how people create, enforce, and contest immigration systems. The collection's materials like this one, labeled Regarding Your Intent to Self-Deport, is legal paperwork that has been spliced and doodled on in order to better visualize a shrouded decision-making process and the fixed categories that immigration systems impose. So looking at this, passport or instructions for crossing. With Marcia Santos, the title impacts who and how you might find this item. How might the meaning change if the title was passport? If we describe the item as instructions, it might allow us to think about the limits and the authority of the passport, which defines how someone can freely move and stay. So this is artist Zur, who created collages from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, home portal. Alongside the work is a shared story about an evening being detained by ICE agents. Instead of naming the files by the web page name, for example, CBP Home App, Zur names his materials regarding your intent to self-deport. How does this change how we interpret the app's function? So let's see. Keywords could be immigration, border, ICE, or keywords could be write to me, don't forget, careful. So in elementary school, my friends would tell me stories about crossing using the scorpion bug as a placeholder for ice or migra. Can the scorpion be a keyword to find each other's story? Can our descriptions contain that joke that broke the stress while a loved one finally left the house? Can our keywords be pulled from anxious text message threads from the person processing the collection's mom? Can our finding aid include doodles someone drew on the side of the PDF while they waited in line? So these ideas are not answers, and maybe they veer into an art project, but let's design finding this collection for each other and find that human part that we need from art. So, John Bertle collection. So since I've known John, these are the many ways he has signed his name. So John Bertle's materials include performance scripts, collaborative art puzzles, two felt suits, books made out of resin-dipped fabrics with mosaic bits, drawings, an oral history, and a breakup letter. Each time John brings his archival materials into LACA, he signs off for his items. And as you can see, it's often different spellings of his name. We use that current spelling to enter in his newest accessioned items. And sure, we can all, you know, link the names in the back end and make recommendations to also search his connections with Human Resources Gallery, an Eternal Telethon, Artists Run Galleries in LA, a pirate radio station, a webcast fundraising collective for a queer elderly home in the Salton Sea. But our artists have non-static identities, which make necessary different ways of managing their collections. There's some items. Felt suit. So to finish, this is our reminder that archives are historically designed for people who already know what they're looking for. If you have arrived at this conversation, you most likely know how to search a variety of platforms and databases to get here, myself included, sometimes. How can our art and our creative descriptive data first get people to even expect that the archive might have something that is relevant to our current survival? Paying for our car lease, moving across the city, drawing a map, a sketch, feeling like shit, or finding a way to congregate and party together. So LACA is a nonprofit. In the US, nonprofits are tentacles of the state. With that said, I do not work for the state, and nor do we have a grant requirement or a boss that demands we use a particular terminology. So let's not data enter our items as if we do. And finally, how can we learn from each other's materials to make our lives together more tolerable? These collections show our complicated artistic lives and the different ways that we try to talk to each other. So thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Those were beautiful presentations. I'm just so thankful and inspired by all of you. And I really, just thank you. I think for a lot of us, this is what we need to hear in this moment. I'm just so grateful for your time and your thoughts in this space and being here together today. I'm going to kick it off with a question for all of you, and then I think I'll hand it off to Emily and Jessica, and then we'll open it up to audience questions. So I have so many questions, but trying to focus in on one. I'm interested in this sort of paradox between the responsibility that we have to the people who are represented in our collections, right? The people in the photographs, or the artists who have contributed, the donors. There's a paradox there between our responsibility to them and how we represent them, and then what may be needed for other people to find and access those records. And I think, Haley, you brought this up at the end in terms of like, how do we reach those people who don't already know what they're looking for? And how do we anticipate, as people who create metadata or create research around metadata, how do we anticipate what someone might need? And still remain true to the desires and the historic realities of the people who are represented in the collection. So I just wonder if we could talk a little bit about that balance.
I can speak to that because actually there was something that I forgot to say, which was, for those who don't know, the examples that I showed from Palestine, Jaffa is Tel Aviv. So this obviously affects, of course, Tel Aviv. The colonial infliction is a more common name than Jaffa. That's the nature of colonization. So that being said, while we're still working on our website and things like this, in our metadata schema, we follow Jaffa, and then the harmful or offensive term is any colonial. So Tel Aviv is a harmful or offensive term. People can still search Tel Aviv but they will be kind of, it'll come up saying, well, did you mean Jaffa? So in the sense, okay, it's still a searchable term, but there is this insistence on a correction, insistence on accuracy. So, and this kind of links to what Haley, you said at the end about historically archives of, for people looking, and people know what they're looking for. I'm paraphrasing and butchering what you said, but it's true. But I suppose what we can do through metadata, in the example that I just showed of what's on my mind anyway, is encourage a kind of critical engagement with this material, to actually encourage a way of thinking about it. Whether they agree with it or not, it's still encouraging a thought process. So opening, so something might be less searchable, let's say, but it does facilitate other kind of ideas or things to proliferate. That's my 2 cents.
Anyone else have thoughts about that tension? Okay, Jessica, do you want to ask a question?
Sure, yeah. My question that I've been thinking about since we kind of embarked on this journey, because we deal a lot with taxonomy and controlled vocabulary, I want to ask the question to the group or anyone in the chat: do guidelines for subversive metadata inherently undermine its subversive potential?
So yeah, can you say that one more time? Do guidelines, like does the container itself kind of make it less uh meaningful or
Right. Yeah, is it too restrictive? Does it kind of, does it restrict that subversive potential? I guess, like, how do we navigate that as archivists or people doing this kind of work, to have something that's searchable and findable and somewhat controlled, but then how do we fit that into the guidelines without being so constrictive?
Yeah, the whole time that we were meeting and speaking about this conversation, I kept thinking of Adrienne Reach's incredible quote in her poem where she says, "This is the oppressor's voice, or this is the oppressor's language, but I need to talk to you." It's something like that, and yeah, it's in that way that like, this like this archive. This is the way that we're working and it's already so troubled, but I need to talk to you. And that's the way that I tried to join this conversation today, which is like, well, I want to I want to talk to you. And so we already know that language is moving, and it's riddled with so many impossibilities.
Yeah, I agree with what Haley was saying. I think, kind of inevitably, I mean, each day where we're living in some sort of contradiction, right? We're anti-capitalist or anti this, anti that, and we're all, so I think accepting that there is maybe contradictions at play, how to be a decolonial archive while still participating in archival formations and structures. It's not easy, but I think it's possible to do that with subversive language. Okay, we can use the formation, but how can we be still imbue it with some sort of irreverence or criticality? And at the end of the day, there is a kind of practicality. People come in searching for images that they want to see. So practically speaking, I mean, you know, these tools do facilitate that. If we can be subversive through how we kind of describe particular things that are then searched, I think that's where we can, I don't know, resist the structure.
I could jump into from maybe just a different perspective. I immediately thought of the power of constraint in art. Artists must work with constraint, the constraints of their materials, capacity to remove is a profound ability that an artist has. It's as important as what they create, what they refuse to include. As far as I know, I'm not an artist myself. But I was also frantically searching for this quote from John Berger. Just why not throw another one out there? I don't know. It came to mind because I'm thinking two things can be true at once, right? A controlled vocabulary can be oppressive and also empowering at the same time, depending on how it's used. And the quote that I was thinking of that is about darkness, which I'm writing about. It's just he says, "In war, the dark is on nobody's side. In love, the dark confirms that we are together." In love, in war, the dark is on nobody's side. In love, the dark confirms that we are together. I love that paradox, to speak to Sharon's word, that maybe it's about the implicit relations that are held within whatever kind of controlled vocabulary or other kind of controlling text somebody's creating, like what kind of togetherness it produces. And those are probably things that aren't on the page necessarily. I was really fascinated by Haley's reference to whisper networks, for example. So there's also just the things that implicitly surround the document and the use of it, the control, what surrounds the statement of control, who's using it and why. Yeah.
Emily, do you have a question you want to ask?
Yeah, I'll ask a question. So I think I kind of brought this up in our like call, and I've asked like a million people this over the course of my time as an archivist, but I'm just super curious about how information professionals that are advocating for this sort of subversive metadata work, how do you all navigate the constraints of like rigid content management systems or finding aids even? I know there's like been a lot of talk in our field about how some of these sort of best practices are becoming outdated over time. And oftentimes the system requirements, they fail to accommodate, like difficult or contested heritage. And there's like an imperative for a static response in some of these. And I've come across this challenge a lot in my own work. So I'm just curious to hear how other people are responding to it. Thanks.
Yeah, I can jump in. I mean, I don't even know if at LACA we would I don't know if we could information professionals. I'm like, uh, we're pooling together our things. We're trying to talk and learn from each other. I mean, um, we're we would all identify as artists. Um, and yeah, I think that these while we're cognizant of these structures that exist, we're also centering our work, and this is how we describe our things, and this is how we're moving. And so it's a kind of I was hearing the title of this talk, which is outside the box, and I was like, but I'm not outside my box. I'm in my box. This is my box. My box is my box is totally fine, and it's only outside the box when I other myself or we other ourselves or we're in another place. So I think that's how we're trying to kind of shift that, and that takes a lot of unlearning work, and we're all still working on it.
If I could maybe reframe that question a little bit, I think Kyle, you brought this up in your talk about like, are the structures that in which we're operating, especially online, like the structure of social media, the structure of the internet, are they actually inhibiting, or I mean, I know they promote and they inhibit interaction, the creation of nearness or aboutness. And I wonder if these systems are just, I've been reading a little bit about, you know, like the whole structure of social media is, you know, creates balkanization, right? It creates factions. And is that just baked into the system? Or is there something that we can do? Is there a little more movement within the system where we can find, like you said, find each other in the darkness, I guess?
Man, if I had the answer to this, that would be incredible. Yeah, but there's something fascinating about how we're all asking this question together at the same time. I don't know. I think there are people way smarter than me on this topic that could speak to this, but there are these moments of rupture that break through. There are moments like where something somebody says just violates all the algorithmic limits that have been placed upon us, or where there's a sudden feeling of nearness among people who typically aren't near each other. Too often, that's a disaster or some kind of violence that does that. And I'm wondering about how can like highly creative and inventive thing like music does this sometimes get people near each other and with each other. I don't know that I have the level of sophistication of knowledge to understand the algorithms and the AI systems that are doing this work. I'm also really interested in things I was reading from Meredith Whittaker, who I quoted earlier, the head of Signal, about the kinds of things that aren't currently funded that should be funded, that can do profound things that don't necessarily rely on the profit structures that are currently in place. Because at the end of the day, I mean, the money speaks very loudly in all the places that are structuring our social engagements with each other online. So how can capital be redirected to projects that are actually about affiliation and connection and also productive divergence? And Meredith Whittaker seems to be one among many people who are thinking very carefully about that, but they're up against incredible forces of resistance, incredible, from the things that are on their phone to the workings in boardrooms. So, yeah, I'm not saying anything new with that, but yeah.
Lydia, any thoughts about systems? I know you all are in the process of implementing a new DAMS, so I'm just curious if you've come up against any barriers or obstacles, you know, in terms of what you want to implement versus what is possible.
I mean, I was thinking about this. I mean, everything that we're independent and we do everything in-house. So in terms of parameters around content, let's say, there aren't any. We haven't yet come like how we want to speak about things or how we want to refer to things. You know, as a team, we agree on it together, we implement it, and there's not this kind of power that we have to kind of deal with. Technologically, I have to be honest, I'm not well versed enough in the understandings of Drupal and the technologies of the DAM system to really speak to it. I'm more on the providing the content side of things. As far as I know, so far so good. But I think more about, okay, what are we able to say and not able to say in the kind of the current political climate. And in this, I mean, because, you know, let's say on the world scale, we do say we make things very plain that are, you know, for some maybe controversial. We refer to things in ways that others would disagree with, let's say, even let's say that Armenian genocide, calling it as such. or the, yeah. In that regard, this is kind of what I can only think about in terms of restriction, because I'm not in the kind of I don't have any kind of technological knowledge. I know that there are issues with Instagram sometimes when we want to say things, but I think that's just the way things are with Palestine, right? It's not exclusive to the Arab Image Foundation. So sorry, I can't really give a very interesting answer on that.
No, no, not at all. I was just curious. I have one more question, and then I think we'll go to audience questions. I think I would like to know your thoughts about this open access movement, right? Like making everything open and freely available on the internet. That's a big part of Curationist, right? We only offer open access content and metadata. And, yeah, I'm just curious what you all think of that, and is that a positive thing, a negative thing, somewhere in between? Yeah.
I can already hear the programmer that we work with really closely saying like not every single thing is open access, and I'm like LACA's open access completely. And there's a couple things to that. uh Very excited, very much part of the way that we're working. Come, photograph, remix, collage stuff, copy and paste it. These materials are for us. We need to use them now. Uh, let's not do this for an imagined future. Let's use this. Um, I will say that we've had really hilarious situations where we've digitized a cassette tape and then the person's like, you were supposed to listen to this in the car. Um, and it needs to be a cassette tape. And that was the intention. Um, no one's going to buy my book if you scan the whole thing. So, um, there's that which we try to take into account. There's times when we decide otherwise. Um, And then I'd also say it's incredible, and this took me a lot of years to understand what this meant, but it's incredible what you offer for free, and people will still come and steal from the archive. Um, and it's a kind of movement of, or it's a kind of way people move in a kind of extractive way where it's like, I would have given you all this information. Someone else could do this presentation. It doesn't have to be me sharing about LACA. But instead, someone's going to come and they're going to steal the thing that's available to all of us. And that's something that we're always grappling with. Um, how how can we teach each other otherwise? To move differently.
I think about when I think about open access, I feel intense excitement and worry at the same time, and the worry side comes from what I've read from people, for example, writing about traditional knowledge labels and the idea of necessary differential access to objects. The idea that this is not for everyone to see always. And I feel like among thinkers that I respect on this front that come to mind, like Ariella Azule's writing about this kind of imperial right, this presumption of an imperial right to have access to all things. That would be the kind of the most worrying critique among the most worrying critiques you could pose towards what is seemingly very good, as you say, open access, that it is a presumption built into it of a kind of always on, always availability. So how do you balance, obviously, like that, an understanding and respect for that critique with all of the affordances and power and empowerment of open access? I don't know, but I wonder about different uses of metadata to structure forms of access, like TK labels as one example. I also wonder about indications of something not being there. You know, we have a presence mindset when we are working with objects in metadata. What if we have an absence mindset as well about indicating what is absent and why? That is something I'm deriving. There's a paper that my nervousness will not allow me to recall, Michelle Codwell, I think, on like the documents that are missing from certain archives, like in the case of human rights archives or other kinds of, there's some sort of implied absent things that are forced absences or things that should be there. You know, it could be various things. So yeah, I think there's the right to refuse access, and there's also the fact that something's not there that could be marked. And I'm obviously wary, like these things are very, we can put the words together to say these things, but I know that like when you're sitting in front of a database or you have a website or you have objects, it's not like easy to just sort of magically invoke these critiques into practice. I mean, it's tremendously difficult. You know, you're in a striated, gridded environment. You have things you want to do. You have time is short, money is short. So obviously it's highly complex, but I think these sorts of complex critiques should be held very near nonetheless, somehow. Like I said, easy for me to say, but I think it's important.
I share what Kyle described as this excitement, but also nervousness with open access. The intention is for once the collections are online, once all the technology stuff is the website's up, there is the intention for things to be open access. We're not possessive. We don't want to have that kind of apply this kind of like accumulative possessive logic. But at the same time, we do have a responsibility because we are custodians. As I said, you know, we've been entrusted to care for these photographs. They're not all just found photographs. There's different contract types, blah blah. And so in this way, you know, there is a responsibility to the subjects imaged, and as we know, sometimes things can get into the wrong hands, things can be manipulated, and things can be taken advantage of. For example, currently, while the whole collection isn't available online, we have a process of image requests. And we require the researcher or the person that's requesting an image to provide us with as much information as they can on their interest in a particular research topic and how they want to use the image, because of this responsibility that we feel to the subjects and to these histories. This is especially the case with images that we have of Palestine. We're very, very rigorous about who can use what in this regard, because, you know, of course, images of Palestine can absolutely, I mean, the whole land got in the wrong hands, right? So images certainly can as well. So it is this kind of double-edged sword where you know, you don't want to have this accumulative, possessive, you know, close the door, traditional archive, you can only come in with, you know, gloves thing. But at the same time, you know, there is a responsibility as you know, custodians of cultural material. So it's difficult. One of the solutions that we found or are intending to implement is that with particularly sensitive images, whether that be of nude subjects or images of people that are imaged in ways that are, you know, where they're particularly subjugated, there's a blur and a disclaimer. We haven't yet implemented that, but this is one of the things that we've brainstormed. But it's difficult. It's difficult to straddle these two things.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all so much. I'm going to hand it over to Jessica and Emily to read some of the questions in the Q&A.
Jessica, if you want to start and we could just switch off because there's a bunch, or I guess I could start because I'm already talking. Okay, so we have a question from an anonymous attendee for Haley. There are two for Haley. I'll tack them on together. So how do you center the artist in cataloging and metadata practices, which you kind of touched on already? And then the second question is kind of just, oh, you're typing an answer already. Will Archive Night School be offered again? Thank you.
Well, I'll talk about the Archive Night School first. Yes, we're hoping to roll that out soon, and that'll be announced on all of our on our database, on our website, our socials. And if you have any questions about it, always get in touch. Happy to chat and share resources before or after, during. Let's see. How do you center the artist in cataloging and metadata practices? I think there, I think I touched on it a little bit with, are we keywording this where it says border, or are we keywording this that says crossing, or take care, what's up, mom? And so I think that's one. I think it's also a lot of internal work. It's reminding each other, what is, like, no one, I mean, we all got together and pooled our materials together, but no one asks us to do this. And so why are we working our 9 to 5s with such passion and diligence, and then going in exhausted into our Freedom Archive? And so it's like, if we're choosing to be here, what do I need to say to you? And then how people can talk about their struggles together and make meaningful change between one another. And so, yeah, it takes a group that is working on that, and artists working on that, and constant practice, being in a practice. And yeah, we slip and slide. It's really difficult, but we're doing this for the reason, we're not doing this for something other than so we can talk to each other and understand our lives. So thank you for that question.
For the sake of time, I'm going to kind of group two of the most upvoted questions in the chat or in the Q&A. So one question was to share thoughts on the immense amount of labor this can place on catalogers and information professionals. And then kind of the second, I think this can kind of work together, but the second question is how do you balance the potential for AI to enhance discoverability with AI's inseparability from oppression and environmental destruction? I think just to elaborate a little more, I have often been told in workplaces more recently, not curationists, that, I'm struggling with this workload, and I've been told, well, have you used AI to help? And oftentimes I feel like it's not really possible for the kind of work that we do. So thoughts on that. I'm curious, in the intersection of helping with feeling overworked or kind of burnt out, or just the immense amount of labor that we deal with anyway.
I think I can answer this quickly, contrary to how I've been speaking this last hour and a half. But I think as a foundation, we're very much anti-AI, and so we've never actually considered to use it at all. On the contrary, there's a rejection of it. Because we're not maybe using these tools or whatever, because we're using our labor, and we're a very small team and we all help one another, we know that work takes time. And so there is a willingness for work to take time, for things to slow down. for labor to slow down and for there not to be this kind of rush to do something. And from that slowing down, actually more ideas emerge, more conversations are had, and yeah, people wait, but there is something maybe more considered and something of greater quality that kind of comes from it. Things linger, which can be frustrating, but the team discusses things together and arrives at some sort of point. I mean, not everything, but for things that really are significant. And it's okay for something to take a bit longer if it means we're not participating in this machine. That was a quick answer on my attempt.
Are there more questions? We've got about 3 minutes left.
There's a lot of questions here. There's another upvoted question by many people. So Nestor is asking or is loving the idea or call to action of let's design finding aids and collections for each other. And they're asking, they're curious to hear more about any interactive approaches that any of you may have taken for, crowdsourcing. I know a few of you, maybe two of you mentioned crowdsourcing specifically. And in this attendee's case, they're kind of speaking from a community oral history collection that they work at that contains family photographs. And they're interested in ways that engage the communities and families who contributed to these collections.
Hey, Nestor. I can jump in on that. Yeah, each collection is so different than the other in how we managed and handled them. And so I can give an example. We have a Mocha Union collection, their unionizing efforts. And we had like a data drop day where people came and they dropped off photos and signs and they wrote about it and gossiped and finally met each other and complained and got each other's phone numbers. And then, another collection will have, we have a collection called Private Practices, which is an AIPI sex worker and performance art collection, where a bunch of dancers were texting each other things and sending each other voice memos, and all these things get compiled. And so there's lots of different ways we're experimenting. We could say crowdsourcing. We also, I think I mentioned above that where I'm sitting in right now is it looks like a cavernous basement on the Zoom screen, but it's a downstairs space where we are doing oral histories, and the purpose is to enrich in our collections, to get all those other things that could be added to descriptive metadata. I hope I answered your question, Nestor.
And I think with that, we might have to wrap up, you guys. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you to all of our panelists. And with that, Amanda, let me turn it over to you. And I will share our contact slide in case anybody would like to get in contact with the team.
Thank you, Nicole, for putting that on the screen. I really encourage anyone who has additional thoughts, comments, questions to please get in touch. Certainly, I think we had enough amongst our panelists, amongst our wonderful audience today to go for another hour and a half. I personally need lunch. I'm sure other people need a break as well. But thank you so much to everyone for attending. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to all of the questions. Frankly, that's always the case, and it's truly a good problem. Like I said, if there's anything super pressing, please do go ahead and reach out. You'll see my personal email is there as well for anything that's curationist specific that we didn't get to. I do want to say again out loud that this has been recorded and will be shared broadly. You'll see that on the Curationist website. You'll see that coming out in our newsletter. I'm sure you'll see clips on our social media. So again, that's going to be made available to everyone. And lastly, I will say for these last minute holdouts, we do plan on circulating a post-event survey. I promise I'm not going to try to sell you anything. I'm just always really curious to know more about the people who come to these things. I'm really curious to get to know our audience a little bit more. So if you would take 5 minutes and fill that out, that would be really helpful to us. Thank you again so much, Kyle, Haley, Lydia, Sharon, Jessica, Kyle, Sharon, Jessica, Emily, Nicole. This was all amazing. Thank you so much for all of your work putting this together. And truly, this is the highlight of our year. For anyone who's interested in making sure they get notified about the next Metadata Summit or other events that Curationist puts on, please sign up for our newsletter on the website. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you so much.